Hey everyone, for those of you that are not in an IM3 class yet, this one's definitely a very important video because we're going to be doing a lot of factoring that's not as common in, let's say, Algebra 1 or as we call IM2 class. Here we go. So here they want the GCF, the greatest common factor of this polynomial expression. So how do we do that again? Well, let's look at the numbers. I have an 8 and a 32. We should agree I can divide them both by 8, right? Then let's look at the x's here. I got an x6 here and an x3 there. And really the trick is just take the lower of the two powers. So in our case, I can do a GCF of 8x3, which is answer B. That's going to be our greatest common factor, okay? Now, let's look at the next problem. Here, we're going to take it a step further. We're actually going to find the GCF, but then go ahead and factor it. So if you look at 23 and 46, you should know both of them are divided by 23, right? After all, 23 times 2 is 46. So now let's look at the x's. If I have an x4 and an x3, again, what's the lower power of the two? x3. So 23x3, in other words, is my GCF. So you could see that one's wrong. That one's wrong. Actually, we already know the answer is B. But let's just do it straight up here. How do I do that? Well, if I had 23x4, follow the yellow there, and I divide by 23x3, would I not just simply get x? Or if I take this times x, do I not get 23x4? Okay, now there is a plus in between, right? If there was a minus, we would do a minus, but there is a plus. Watch your signs. Now, as we talked about before, 46 there divided by this 23 is 2, and the x3 divided by this x3 there, of course, it's going to go to 1, right? So this is my factored form, which again is B. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, now, in a previous video, matter of fact, the last video, we talked about this. Notice how this one has an x to the 3, a higher power. If it was a quadratic like these three expressions, we would probably just try to do parentheses, you see? But because not only is there a higher power, but there are 4 terms, we are going to factor by grouping. And that literally means we're going to group the first 2 together. We're going to group the last 2 together. Hence the name factor by grouping. And we're going to do a GCF on each one of these parts right here. So in the first pair, I have a GCF of a 3 and an x squared. Notice the lowest power right there is x squared. Let me clean it up here a little bit. Okay, and so with a GCF of 3x squared, I know this divided by 3x squared is simply x, and this divided by self is 1. We need the 1 right here, guys, like a placeholder. Now notice the second pair is simply just x plus 1. They have nothing in common really except for 1. So we're going to do a positive 1. And 1 times x plus 1, of course, gives me x plus 1. And if you look at my new improved expression, see how they both have a common factor of x plus 1. So I'm going to do an x plus 1 here. And you can see the answer looks like it's going to be D. None of these even come close. That one sort of with x plus 1. But anyways, finishing up. If x plus 1 is gone there, I'm left with 3x squared. If x plus 1 is factored out there, I'm left with plus 1. That, of course, is answer B. Let's look at this next one here. Notice there are 4 terms. Let's pair them up and do a GCF. So in the first one, the 6 and 8, I can divide by 2. Again, take the lower power, g squared in this case. So 6g3 divided by 2g squared is simply 3g. And 8g squared divided by this 2g squared is simply a 4. Now what about the second pair? Well, notice how they both have a negative, so let's do a negative. And both 15 and 20 I can divide by 5, and that's it. My GCF is negative 5. So if I divide negative 15g by negative 5 here, I get a positive 3g. And negative 20 divided by negative 5, I get a positive 4. Notice how they both have the same 3g plus 4 factor. So if I was to do a GCF of 3g plus 4, once I divide it out, I'm left with this, 2g squared. And once that's divided out, I'm left with the minus 5. That is my answer. And as I'm looking, obviously that's wrong, that's wrong. And watch your signs. Looks like it's C, right? I got 2g squared minus 5, 3g plus 4. Notice choice D, guys, they have it reversed. They'll do that to you. Don't let them trick you by simply reversing numbers or signs. Pause the video if you need to. Let's do one more. Again, notice there's 4 terms here. Well, let's pair them up. Let's pair them up. And so in the first pair, 6 and 9 I can divide by 3. I'm going to take the lower of the two powers, x3. This is my GCF. So finishing up, I know 6x4 divided by 3x3 is simply 2x. I know the minus 9, watch the sign right there, is going to be a minus 3 when all is said and done. Now, what about the second pair? Here's a little trick I want you to remember, guys. See how the first one has a negative in front of that 36? Let me just double check. It is a negative there. So remember, more times than not, you're just going to factor out a negative as well. 36 and 54 is also a 9. They also each have an x in them. So negative 9x is my GCF. So let me clean this up a little bit right there. Basically, if I have negative 36x squared divided by negative 9, that's a positive 4x. And 54x divided by negative 9 is a negative 6. Now notice these don't match up because I actually messed up on my GCF. Instead of 9, I needed another factor of 2. So let's not panic here. See how both 4 and 6 have a 2. So watch this. I'm going to take out another 2. That leaves that as a 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 2x minus 3. Again, all I did was divide out another 2, GCF. And so I know 2x minus 3 is definitely one of my factors. So if you look at the answers, obviously that's wrong and that's wrong. I'm down to the other 2 here. So let's see what we got here. With 2x minus 3 gone, I'm left with 3x3. With 2x minus 3 gone there, I'm left with negative 9x times 2, which is negative 18x. Again, it doesn't match up yet, but if you notice, don't they both have another GCF of 3x? So 2x minus 3 is not going to change, but I'm going to take out another 3x. Okay, and here, that divided by 3x is simply x squared. That divided by 3x is a negative 6. Negative 6, sorry. I took out an x, right? Now we can see that this is choice A. So guys, this ends my 4th video. And I hope you're enjoying them. And please make sure you study, obviously, the first 4 I've made so far in this series. Know your factoring, guys. Know how to add, subtract, and multiply polynomials very well.